Without further ado, I would like to introduce the speaker for today. With us, we have Madam Geetha Gopi N, who's a rehabilitation practitioner and a psychologist. Ma'am is the Director of Programs at the Sir Shaktikaran Trust, Cochin. She has over 30 years of experience in helping children with special needs. Ma'am has worked in international schools following an American curriculum for inclusive settings for more than 15 years. Ma'am has done extensive work in curriculum development and adaptations, behavioral management, coordinating and promoting best educational practices using the UDL principles among the staff and parents. Ma'am has also launched the Early Academic Series, that is a teacher's kit for teaching early language skills and basic math based on the universal design of learning. It's a pleasure to have you with us, ma'am. Before I hand over the podium to Geetha ma'am, I would like to inform you all that the session is for 2 hours, 1 hour of knowledge sharing by the expert, and the other hour is where your questions would be answered. Wishing you all a happy learning. Over to you, Geetha ma'am.
A warm good evening to everyone, and we are yet back again on the Ability platform with a continuation of a previous workshop that we had done. So without much ado, I'd just like to go on to the screen sharing and get on to with the proceeds of this today's workshop. So today's workshop is going to be about expressive writing skills, enhancing expressive written expression in children with special needs or those who have academic challenges. We had already dealt with the basic level of this in the previous workshop. Today we are going to go a step further and go on to the advanced level. So just a quick recap on what we did in the previous workshop on the same skills, that is writing skills, particularly with regard to written expression. Previously, we had gone into what is writing, the importance of writing, how it correlates with reading and reading comprehension, and how it figures, how written expression figures is probably the end or a cumulative skill that is acquired as a result of LSRW skills, that is listening, speaking, reading, and then finally coming into the writing part. We had also talked about, how to work on basic sentences, expanding of sentences, and so on. So how to frame a sentence, what are the grammatical things, the vocabulary and other things that go into sentence writing. We had taken a look at how to form basic sentences, and we had also taken a look at how to expand sentences. What are the different ways we can stretch or expand sentences and write more interesting sentences with details. We had also looked at, when it comes to these skills, what are the challenges faced by children with special needs in the written expression, especially in the emergent written expression area. And we had talked about different strategies, techniques that helps them to learn how to write basic sentences and then expanded sentences. So today we are going to look at a step further. From sentences, we are going to learn how children need to string sentences to form paragraphs or to write compositions and so on. So basically, we are going to work on the writing process, like how to get to producing a complete written piece. We're going to talk about the importance, the relevance, and why we have to do, teach the teaching process. We'll get an insight into the different strategies and techniques that are employed to teach children to write paragraphs, different kinds of paragraphs, different kinds of formatted writing. And then, of course, we have to, since it is based on an inclusive education series, we have to look into what are the challenges and barriers that children with special needs have in this particular area. And then we look at strategies, techniques, and different activities for supporting children with special needs. So what is writing? Just a quick rehash, a recap, and a re-looking at what is writing. Writing is a method of representing the oral or the spoken language in a visual print form. And it helps us to communicate our thoughts and ideas so that it is to others in a way that they can read and understand what we are trying to communicate. So basically, writing is a skill that helps us to put a visual print form to our thought processes and communicate it to others in a readable, legible format. When we talk about the writing process, writing involves not just one step. It's not like you talk about a particular topic and then it is, you discuss and then children just write. There are a series of steps involved in this, finally producing a piece. And this is called the writing process. Writing involves, a step-by-step, a series of steps in a certain sequence, which leads to the culmination of and production of a finished written piece. Focusing on this writing process helps children to learn how to write paragraphs successfully and in the way that it should be presented. And if we teach writing in a step-by-step process, a lot of times what we call the writer's block, that is quite often seen in children in general, and with children with special needs in particular, where they may have ideas in their, inside, but bringing them out in the form of written expression may be a huge barrier. So by teaching this writing process in a logical sequence, in a step-by-step method, we can break free the writer's block, which forms as a barrier to producing good written pieces. In general, if you roughly look at, how is the writing process? How does it proceed from the thought to the end product? Basically, it has five steps. The first one is called pre-writing stage, where we are thinking of the ideas depending on what we are going to write. Or if a certain topic has been given for writing, that forms as a prompt for generating ideas and information about that topic. So that is the pre-writing stage. You have still not started writing here. You're still just thinking of the ideas and, probably saying it aloud, discussing it, and so on. That will contribute to the written piece. Then comes the putting those ideas down. As the thoughts come into you about the whatever topic you're thinking on, you can just jot quick, not in detail, but just quick jotting down of points, getting the ideas down on paper. And that's the second stage, which is called the drafting stage. It's a rough draft that you prepare. And then you have to actually then write you have to revise that draft. Once you put a rough draft down, you have to make changes. You have to see if your sentences are in order, whether whether you've expanded your sentences, whether you put in interesting details, all these things, or whether the sentences have been constructed in the way it should be, whether there is a flow from one sentence to the other, especially when you're writing a composition or a paragraph. All these changes form part. Making those changes from the rough draft forms the third part of the writing process, which is revising. So you revise your rough draft, and then you go on to editing. When you're doing editing, you're actually proofreading it. You're rereading everything and correcting the errors if there are any. If there are spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, if you've missed out any word, any kind of these kind of errors can be checked, rechecked upon rereading, and then they can be corrected. And then you do the final act of making a fair draft, which is called publishing. That is, you create your final fair copy of the written piece. So it doesn't matter who is writing, even if when we write an article or an assignment or whatever it is we are doing, we do go through these same processes, and it is not any different for children. So when it comes to teaching children, we have to teach the writing process. And why do we have to teach the writing process? How does it benefit the teacher as well as the student? When we teach the writing process, it is not just an information given and then you're setting the child to do the written task. Throughout the whole writing process, it emphasizes the value of constant interaction and communication. That is, there is a lot of dialogues happening between the teacher as well as the student. What it enables the student to do, it gives them, empowers them by asking them to talk about the topic, by talking about each of the steps that they are doing in the writing process. So writing process is not just telling them this is how you do it, but at each step, there is a constant dialogue happening between the educator as well as the student. And through this exchange, what happens is you can continuously improve upon the student performance by giving regular feedback. And it doesn't have to, this feedback doesn't have to wait until the child is completely finished producing the piece. In each of the process, from the process of pre-writing, that is where you're generating the ideas, to putting the ideas down on paper, to revising those ideas, proofreading and editing them, and then finally making a final a finished product, which is, like you say, the publishing part of it, making a fair, finer copy of your written piece. At each of these stages, you can provide feedback. So what happens is, when in each of the stages you're providing feedback, the child gets a chance to correct themselves and improve upon the process that they're using. So it is very useful, not only for the educator, but also for the student to understand what the writing process is, and therefore go through those writing processes. Because as an educator, it informs us where exactly the child is having problems. Whether the child has problems in generating the ideas, whether they have problems in putting it down on paper, just making the rough draft, whether they have problems with proofreading or editing it, whether they have problems in writing lengthy pieces. And then finally, in the final, all these stages, in the final stage, whether they're able to incorporate all the feedback that you've given them, all the error correction that we have done in the process, and then produce a final piece which is relatively free of errors, or at least has incorporated the feedback that you've given and improved upon themselves in each step. So providing feedback, again, when you provide the feedback, encourage them, because we know that our children, especially children with special needs, have a block towards writing. Many of them have issues which prevent them from becoming good writers. So give great encouragement to them, but at the same time give them constructive criticism as well. Explain to them where they are going wrong, or where they can improve, how they can improve. Give them those strategies, give them those techniques, and and give them those tools that they can access and use and apply, so that they can improve upon their written expression. And students, when you give these comments and constructive criticism as well as encouragement in each of these steps, they can utilize those and move towards the next step in the writing process. And this constant exchange of comments about the writing, that in itself creates a conversation. It creates a kind of dialogue, as I said earlier, between the teacher and the student. And the dialogue doesn't just talk about the content of the writing, but it also talks about the process of writing, what they have to do at each step in the writing process to help them improve. So again, a very, very positive, constructive way of teaching is, teaching the writing process, making the students aware what the writing process is all about and how to go about doing it. If you look at research findings also, most research point to the fact that children do have, a lot of children, even those with special needs, do have excellent imagination and creativity, but they do not know how to develop it into the form of written expression. They don't know how to readily convert their ideas into written expression or into a finished writing piece. And expressive writing It provides many of these children with a safe, supporting environment to express themselves, to become excellent communicators, to become self-advocates for their own causes. So a lot of things that cannot necessarily be said can be conveyed through writing. And if you enable these children to become good writers, then they become effective communicators in that process. It also helps children to effectively and it acts as a very good psychosocial mechanism as well. But with a lot of our students, they may have issues with psychosocial issues such as trauma or stress, fear, anxiety, um, you know not being able to self-restrain themselves, anger management issues, and such kind of conditions may be present in some of our children. And for them too, being able to write about it and talk about it and discuss these things, it actually gives them a venting out process. So writing, is a good venting out process. Sometimes we do ask children to write diaries, daily diaries, or if they are angry, for them to calm down and write about what made them angry, how to go about solving, and what did they do when they got angry? Are there better ways of dealing with it? All this can be better managed through the process of writing as well. So writing is not just a tool for producing a paragraph on a given lesson or something. It can also be effectively used for higher level behavior management as well. And a survey by the National Literacy Trust in the UK has shown that children who engage in literacy, especially the writing part of it, are definitely several times better equipped emotionally and mentally. Their mental and emotional health and well-being are much higher than those who are unable to write and express themselves. So being able to write is a good venting out process as well. So when we come to teaching the writing process, before we go into the process of writing and the step-by-step and how to go about doing it, just a quick recap on, what are the writing skills that we need to be working on. When we start with emergent writing, we work on letter formation, numbers, words, etc. Then we move on to sentences, and then sentences with details or sentences that are expanded, expanded sentences. These three we dealt in detail in the previous workshop. Today, we are going to go into the next order of slightly advanced writing. That is, we are going to talk about paragraph writing, informative paragraphs, descriptive paragraphs, and explanatory paragraphs. Then we are also going to take a sneak peek into formatted writing. That is, where there is a certain set internationally agreed upon format for writing a letter or for writing an invitation, a thank you note, a book report, etc. And then, of course, stories and essays. Being able to write a little story or by being able to write essays, which is basically nothing but putting several paragraphs together. So the basic thing is learning how to write a paragraph, different kinds of paragraph, and then you can put these paragraphs together to form, many paragraphs together to form stories and essays. So what is a paragraph? Before we even get into the act of being able to write or teach how to write a paragraph, let's understand what a paragraph should have. What does it include? It includes a group of sentences that focuses on a single or a one particular idea. And if the paragraph has to effectively convey or communicate what it is trying to communicate about that single idea, it needs to begin with an introductory sentence, which is quite often called the topic sentence. Why it's called the topic sentence is the topic sentence is what introduces the topic to the reader. So the topic sentence is the introductory introduction to the topic in the paragraph. So the first sentence, the topic sentence, should be present in a paragraph. And then the other sentences that follow should have details that support, that contribute to the main idea of or the topic. So the topic sentence gives the intro, and all the rest of the other sentences that follow the topic sentence adds on details to that main idea or the central topic. So for example, if you ask the children to write a composition about, say, my school. Okay, the main idea is, my school. So it could probably have a topic sentence such as, my school is, and probably give the name of the school. So that will be an introduction to, that topic sentence will introduce what the child is going to be writing about. And then the rest of the sentences that follow, they could say, my school is located in so and so place. It has these facilities, and all the extra details that come with the school. So those are the supporting or the detailed sentences that support the main idea. And then when you write these sentences also, there needs to be a certain flow in the way the sentences are put. So there should be a certain something what we call as sentence cohesion. Cohesion means the one sentence that you write has to be connected to the others. There should be a natural flow, or you should be able to get a visual imagery when you're reading through the paragraph. So it's like, for example, I'm taking the same example of my school. So if they're writing about my school, the topic sentence, they've said my school is whatever the name of the school is. And then they start with the supporting details. Okay, they say my school has several classrooms. And then they talk about the computer lab, and then the cafeteria and so on. And then you find then suddenly the children sometimes come back to the classrooms. My classroom is fitted with smart boards. So there you see the disconnect, right? The smart board should have come with the first supporting sentence, which talked about the different classrooms in the school. So this is what is called as sentence cohesion. So the sentences should be linked to one another. There should be a smooth flow in the way, in the way it has to flow when the reader is reading the paragraph. So sentence cohesion is very important to the construction of a good paragraph. And then once you put in all the details with a certain flow, at the end, it is nice. It gives a good closure when you end the paragraph with a conclusion sentence or an ending sentence. So basically, to give a visual format, to what a sentence is, I've shown what is popularly known as a hamburger paragraph. If you look at the hamburger picture on the screen, you'll find the top part of the bun. That's the topic sentence. So first you put the topic sentence. It tells the reader about the main idea of the paragraph. And then you put in the supporting details. So there could be several supporting details depending on how big you want your paragraph to be, how much information you know about that topic. So you could put in several supporting detail sentences, which are like the fillings of the hamburger sandwich. And then right at the end, the bottom part of the hamburger sandwich's bun is the conclusion sentence, where you're kind of connecting it to the topic sentence, but you're ending you're adding a closing to the paragraph. You end the paragraph with a nice closure. So you could probably, the ending concluding sentence would be, I like my school very much, or my school such and such is one of the best schools in town. Something like that to end your paragraph and give a nice closure to the paragraph. So this is what a paragraph should include. When you talk about a good paragraph, this is what it should include. And this is exactly what we need to teach our children as well. That a paragraph actually has all these parts. And when you write a paragraph, make sure you write each of these parts into your written piece. So getting children to understand what is the structure of the paragraph is very important, and teaching them that structure is also is a very good way of imparting, getting the idea of how to go about writing a paragraph onto students. So when we talk about paragraph writing, we've talked about these are, what it should have. So I would like participants to, just think about, okay, since this is what a paragraph should entail, how can we, just imagine you're going to give the task of writing a paragraph to the children. So what is it that you're going to do? How are you going to kickstart the session on writing a paragraph in your classroom. I would like the participants to please give suggestions.
One of them stated we can give clue words.
Okay, yeah.
Luna said that. I'm waiting for the other responses. Giving keywords, brainstorming with the child, giving a topic, templates, one description of the picture given, providing pictures. We can use question words, explaining them the idea or the theme, asking them to write or talk about what interests them. Can show any image and ask them to write about it. Give them few helping or outlining words. Dynamic games can be played with them where ideas come up. Use of questions, nature reading, provide pictures to guess the paragraph. Think of keywords, feelings, thought about the topic, any personal experience. Ask them to choose a topic that they are best comfortable with. Fill up the blanks. One of the participants would like you to repeat the question as well, huh?
Okay, I think lots of very good suggestions have come from the participants. So I'm just going to, give a more form to what they have already said. That is, when we talk about paragraph writing, I usually use the acronym, the POWER process. So the POWER stands for POWER. Each of them stand for something that you have to do. So take the children through this process when you're teaching them how to write a paragraph. So the P in the POWER stands for planning. So plan. So when you're planning, you can give a topic, like somebody said, give a topic. So people have also said that, use their personal experiences. Yes, so whenever you're giving a topic, try and see that you give a topic that they're familiar with, so that they don't have, it's not totally, uncharted territory. You can use anything from what they've already read or learned across subject areas, or what they're currently learning in science or social studies or math even. Even math topics can be used as for paragraph writing. So planning involves giving them a topic and then using, yes, group discussions or brainstorming about that topic. So you can generate as many ideas as possible. And especially if you're doing this in a classroom, there are so many children. You can either do this as a large whole classroom activity where the teacher is encouraging the children to come up with ideas, or you can even divide your classroom into smaller groups and each group can do their own discussions and can brainstorm and jot down their ideas. So the planning stage involves having all this, giving a writing prompt or a topic to kickstart or to get them thinking about what they're going to write about, using brainstorming and group discussion so that you can elicit, you can get as much information, facts, opinions, whatever it is that pertains to the topic that you have given them or pertains to whatever topic they're going to write about. After P, the next stage is the O of the POWER process, which is organize. So now they have all these ideas, they've said everything, and sometimes they may not, many of the times when you're brainstorming, things are not necessarily in order. You're just putting down, jotting down whatever each one has contributed. So now comes the task of putting these ideas into a certain organized fashion. So many a time when we organize, and this is where many of our children do have issues, how to organize those ideas into a certain form. So we can use graphic organizers, we can use mind mapping strategies to put these thoughts and ideas in a very logical sequence and in an orderly manner. Remember, I talked about sentence cohesion in a paragraph. So one sentence idea leading to the other. There needs to be a connect between the sentences and a flow in their writing. So to develop that flow, organization is very, very important. So use different kinds of strategies to help them organize those ideas. And especially when you use things like a graphic organizer, it helps to break the assignment into smaller steps, into more, retrievable steps that they're able to do it bit by bit. So it is not like one whole paragraph has to be written suddenly, but they can write it bit by bit, adding on the sentences and, in a certain sequence in an orderly way. And then we come to the W part of the power process, that is actually writing it down. So once you've organized the ideas, the next process is writing it down. Use the ideas that you put down in the graphic organizer to write a rough draft. And when we say write, it is just a rough draft because we know there may be a lot of errors or things that you're just giving form to the ideas that you've jotted down. You're just putting them into sentence format. The fifth part of the power process is E, that is edit. Edit means you're actually going to proofread it. Look for spelling errors, look for any sentence construction errors, look for punctuation errors, etc. So, whatever, whenever you're doing editing, again, there are tools available which are like word balls can be used, dictionaries can be used, word banks, if some people already mentioned about giving, clue words and so on. So if word banks and clue words or vocabulary has been, key vocabulary has been provided, they can be accessed. And then when you do editing, there is something called, another acronym that I use, which is called COPS. We'll see that in a while. To use COPS to edit. And again, proofreading is one skill which many of our children do have trouble with. So, proofreading as a skill needs to be trained and taught to children. And then after they proofread or edit, the final process comes, that is the R part of the power process, which is rewrite. Now they're going to rewrite and make a fair draft of the writing piece after correcting all the, all the errors and whatever they've missed out. And after all the editing, now they can, they're ready to publish the fair draft, that the final draft. And this can be a process that you use in your classroom. You can use the power process because when you use the power process, the first write-up is not what they give you for submission. The first write-up is the W part of the power process. Then there are still two more steps for them where they can go through the editing and the proofreading process. And sometimes, especially in the early stages when the children are not very good at proofreading, it is we as educators who help them to proofread, get them into the habit and train them how to proof. So we help them with that, and then they go back, fix those errors, and then rewrite. And the rewritten piece is what is taken up for grading, the final grading or the final correction. So this is why I said teaching the writing process is important, because you're not taking up what the child has written firsthand for correction or for grading. Instead, you're getting them to go through the process of being able to revise, to correct themselves, and to publish a final draft. Of course, even in the final draft, especially with children who have special needs, there may still be errors. But still, we have given them ample opportunities, and we're giving them the training of going through the process of being able to find their own errors and self-correct themselves, because ultimately they have to become independent to whatever extent that differs from child to child. But as much as possible, we want them to become independent. So that is why teaching the power process really helps, because it is one way of leading them to become more independent writers. So they realize that the first time they just jot down something, that shouldn't be turned in for submission. Instead, they have to go back, reread, recheck, proofread, edit, and make the necessary changes, and then only put it up for final submission or the final correction. So teaching the power process is, as I said, we are not necessarily looking only at the end product, that is the paragraph that they have produced. Instead, we are focusing on each and every step that leads up to producing a written paragraph. And when I talked about editing, I said I use another acronym, which is COPS for editing. And COPS is, C stands for capitalization. So all the rules that go with capitalization. When do you use capitals? At the beginning of a sentence, when you're writing important headings or titles of the or proper nouns, when you're using the word I as in I as the first person, if you're mentioning proper nouns of people, places, etc. So all those need to be capitalized. So the first thing you look for is if, when you're proofreading is, have you put the capitals in the right places? Have you missed out putting the capitals in where it should be? So that is the first thing. Next in the COPS goes to organization again. Check whether, if you've already given the graphic organizer, go through the graphic organizer and check whether all the points that have been put into the graphic organizer has actually been produced as a complete sentence in the paragraph. So whether the graphic organizer has been utilized properly in sequence to write complete sentences of the paragraph. And also organization also refers to how the presentation is, whether the writing or the written piece is legible and presentable enough for other people to be able to read it properly. So organization refers to both, not only the overall appearance, but also how whether they've used all the ideas that they've had in a proper sequence. Then it goes to punctuations. The COPS, the P part of the COPS is about punctuations. To check whether they've used capital letters at the beginning, end mark, the correct punctuation mark at the end of the sentence. For example, if they've used a full stop or a question mark or an exclamation mark, which usually goes at the end of a sentence to signal the completion of a sentence. Also, whether they've used other punctuations, which may or may have be necessary depending on what they have written, such as comma or speech marks or quotation marks, etc. So working on these kind of, if they missed out on putting these punctuations, or if they put these punctuation in places which are not appropriate, looking for both and correcting them. And then last but not the least, the S part of the COPS is checking the spellings. So when you're checking spellings, you can use dictionary, you can use word balls in your classroom where, most of the high frequency words will be put, word books are similar to mini dictionaries. You can use, tech, nowadays you have tech support, so you can use spell check. So all these things can be used to go about checking upon your spellings. Or if you provided a word bank with key vocabulary that pertains to the topic, they can go through that also. So in whatever way it is, they have to edit using these four main, the four main areas of editing or proofreading. So coming to paragraph writing, we've just talked about the power process and then using the COPS also from the editing part of the power process. You can give actually these kind of graphic organizers, especially when you're starting with paragraph writing. I showed you how the hamburger, hamburger part of the paragraph has all the main topic, sentence, concluding sentence, supporting details, and so on. So you can give these kind of empty graphic organizer templates where children can actually visualize this, because it's very visual. They're able to put those sentences in order, and they can use this as a to put their sentences in order and then expand upon it if necessary. So using graphic organizers like these are good ways to enhance good paragraph writing. One is on the left hand side, the hamburger thing. There is, you can also give how to build a paragraph. Again, another example, another template of a graphic organizer, giving these kind of hints what they have to put in each of those each area of the paragraph, how each build up to the paragraph really helps. You can also have a paragraph web. Here, if you look at the left hand side, this is a paragraph about the park. And you have a web which is similar to a spider web. You have all the different elements that go with the web. And for each of the web, you put clue questions. Somebody already said when I asked about, asked your suggestions, that ask questions, use a lot of questions. So some of the clue questions on the park, like who went with you to the park? What did you see in the park? What did you hear in the park? What was the weather like when you visited the park? Were there any particular smells in it? What did you do in the park? So all the different clue questions that you find in this slide that relates to the web, provides clues on, okay, what are the different sentences that can frame. And initially, when we do a paragraph web or a hamburger web organizer, etc., initially, maybe you just start with one sentence for each of the web or one sentence for each of the details. But then as children get more and more proficient, you can say, okay, what did you see? It doesn't have to be one sentence. It can be 2-3 sentences. You can talk about different things you saw. So then you can get them to expand upon their sentences, putting more details into it. So this is one way of doing it. Main idea in the main topic, the writing prompt is in the center, and you can give clue questions around, and using that they can write the sentences. You can also give descriptive paragraphs. Descriptive paragraphs are a very good way of getting children to develop a certain idea and providing more details about it. One of the good ways of doing descriptive paragraph is think about the story that they have read in the reading or the reading comprehension part of it, and take up a character from there, and write different things about the character. So again, some of the graphic organizers, the one on the left hand side, it talks about what do you write about the character when you are writing, what the character says, what the character is thinking about, how he or she feels during the story, what are the different things or activities they do in the story. So all these things put together make up the character. So you can write a descriptive paragraph on characters based on a story. You can also talk about the character's physical appearance, different character traits that they have, personality traits, whether they're brave, whether they are adventure seeking, or they're fearful, and so on. Or if the character is trying to achieve something, has a goal in front of them. So anything that defines that character, that is part of that character in the story, can be brought about in the form of a paragraph. So again, doing a character sketch really helps. One way of also writing, a character descriptive paragraphs is, not just choosing fictional characters from stories. You can also pick out one particular element. It can even be from say you're writing about the solar system. You can take, say, one of the planets and describe about it. It doesn't always have to be informative as well. You can put in some information about the planet, but you can also add your own opinions and what your feelings are. Now, suppose you're writing about my Earth. You can talk about the actual factual information about the planet Earth, but then you can also add on your own details, such as, how you love, the different physical features of the Earth, like the mountains, the seas, the beaches, and so on. So you can put in not just the information, factual information, you can also put in your own feelings and bring out a descriptive paragraph. So it depends on how you want to set the tone for your paragraph. The informative paragraphs, as I said, usually informative paragraphs go about with non-fiction, which is more like a scientific topic or a math related topic, and so on. So informative paragraphs are also a good way of kickstarting writing. Sometimes with a lot of children with special needs, I usually find descriptive paragraphs are slightly harder. It is easier to start them on informative paragraphs because there are actual facts that they can see or experience and then write about. So informative paragraphs could be a good way of getting kickstarted into paragraph writing. Once they get comfortable with that, you can move on to more descriptive paragraphs. Sometimes there is no clear distinction. As I said, you can have in informative itself, you can have descriptive elements put into it, and vice versa also. In a descriptive paragraph itself, you can put information that you've gathered from reading a story about a particular character, etc., and put them in. So there's no clear, not always is there a very clear distinction about this is an informative paragraph or this is a descriptive Sometimes there is, depends on what is the writing prompt you're giving. If you're asking them to purely be informative, you can mention that when you're giving the writing assignment. But if you are giving them a free choice, then they can put in, they can have a blend of descriptive as well as informative. And here are two different kinds of graphic organizers, where again the format is the same. You have to have a topic sentence or the intro sentence, and then you have to have an ending or a conclusion sentence. And in between, you put in the different details. And if earlier in the descriptive paragraph, it was different kinds of descriptions. In the informative paragraph, it's different facts that you're going to put in. What after you've read a particular thing or after you've done a particular activity. Similarly, you go on to explanatory paragraphs. Explanatory paragraphs are also something which is very, very useful for children with special needs. You can actually do a hands-on activity and then ask them to write about how they went about doing that activity, explaining how they did it. So it can be something like, okay, if you planted, if you planted a seed, you had a gardening project. How did you go about doing the gardening project? Or if you did an artwork, how did you go about doing the artwork? Cooking is one of the most interesting ways on how you can teach explanatory paragraphs. So you can, you can teach them to make a sandwich, or you can teach them how to make a salad or any kind of dish. And after they've actually done that, they can then write about it. So how they went about making that particular dish, or what, what are the different things that they did in each of the steps to make that particular thing. You can also write explanatory paragraphs about, how they went about doing a math problem, for example. For example, if you're teaching them how to add, how did I do the addition? How did I solve the addition problem? So step 1, what did I do? Step 2, how did I do? Step 3, what did I do? So again, have an introductory sentence. This is how I went about learning how to add, or this is how I add. And then step 1, step 2, step 3, or whatever, how many ever steps can describe what you do in the addition process. And then in the closing sentence, you can put, this is how I do my addition problem. So this is how I solve my addition problems. Or sometimes I've got kids who, you come up with very good concluding sentences. And Eureka, I got my sum after doing the addition. So, you can use explanatory paragraphs, link it up with the other things that you're teaching. It could be a math topic, a science topic, home science, or a life skill topic, any of the topics, and they can use that to write an explanatory paragraph. Again, two different graphic organizers where it shows, what is step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So different steps, the sequence of doing that activity can be done, and they can write it. They can also draw pictures. Initially, if they have pictures, if you suppose it is a cooking activity, if you've taken pictures in sequence, they can paste those pictures, or they can draw those pictures and then write sentences to go with it while putting them in a certain logical sequence. So again, that helps in making up an explanatory paragraph. Compare and contrast. This is another way how you can link comprehension activity to a written activity. If you've taught two different concepts, they can compare and contrast, see how they're similar and how they're different. And not only can they not only does that add a deeper layer of comprehension, but they can write about it. Writing about it, again, this helps each other. Writing about it further, helps the comprehension, and comprehending the comparing and the contrasting, or the similarities and the differences, also provides fuel to the writing process. So either way, it helps good reading and writing skills when you use compare and contrast kind of activities in their writing process. And for this, you can use a Venn diagram as given in the picture. There is one which is already filled up, where children have to compare between the whales and the guppies, the guppy fish. And they have to write what is similar and what is different about each. And from this information in the Venn diagram, then they can frame a paragraph. They can talk about, okay, whales live in water, whales and guppies live in water. They can make it as one sentence. Both can swim in water and both have tails as part of their body part. And then you can go about, but whales are mammals and guppies are a form, are fish and they're not mammals. And then they can go about what is the difference between mammals and fish. So you see how the information in the Venn diagram, the similarities and the differences about these two groups of animals can be put into the form of a paragraph, an informative paragraph, which actually gives a deeper level of understanding to the person who is writing and also to the reader. So you can use empty templates like the Venn diagram to use it for, especially when you want children to do critical analysis of two or more concepts that they've learned, and then write about it. So again, this really helps in children coming out with a deeper level of comprehension, but not only understanding it at a deeper level, but also producing it into their written expression. You can also use, summarizing a story or retelling a story as an activity, and put that also using a particular, suitable graphic organizers. Get them to summarize the story in points, like you put up a event map, or you put up a story map template, or a personal narrative template on what happened in the story, who was there, when did the story happen, what were the main events happening at the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. So putting all these things together in the form of a graphic organizer, then using that graphic organizer as a template for paragraph writing. So again, paragraph writing can be derived from many of these activities, which are very much reading comprehension activities, but you can kickstart them into the paragraph writing as well. Again, another graphic organizer which shows how you can do summary and retell. Just giving you a little peek into what are the different kinds of graphic organizers that can be used, and why I'm dwelling so much on this particular area is because many of our children do have problems with this. They have trouble or real block when it comes to organizing their ideas and putting their ideas into a certain logical, organized, sequential form. So use graphic organizers suitable for that particular topic or for whatever the written prompt you're giving. And then we come into formatted writing. Formatted writing is when, suppose you're writing a formal letter, or there is a certain form to it. The date has to be in a particular place. The greeting of the letter has to be in a particular place. You should start the letter. The body of the letter should be written in a particular way, and then at the ending, you have to have a closing to the ending as well as a signature, or you're putting down your own name at the end. So these are called formatted writing, where there is a set format given and you have to write accordingly. So again, provide a model to the children, show them where each of the different parts of the formatted writing is. For example, the date, the greeting, the body, the closing, the signature or your name. Give a model which is already filled in, and then you can give empty templates which will help them to organize these things. You can also have activities where you give a plain, say you give a letter, and then ask them to point out or show where the greeting part is, where the date is, where the body is, where the closing should be, where the signature should be exactly. So, getting them aware of where they need to put the different things in formatted writing activities. This is another formatted writing activity. Again, we do many of these things in the early classes, like an invitation note, inviting them to your birthday party or something. So what are the things that needs to go on into the invitation? Again, put it down as a format. The date should be there, the time, the place, phone number in case, and sometimes you also have consent, like whether will you be attending or will you not be attending. To give them that format show them where these things need to be put in, and then give them an empty template to fill in. So initially you can give them the complete format with all, with all the hints given. Then slowly you can start fading out the hints. And then once all these marks come into the content part of the writing, thinking about the ideas, addressing the writing prompt. But then you also have the other part of the writing where, whether they're using the right syntax and grammar. Grammar is whether they're using the correct verbal forms. For example, if you're writing starting this paragraph in past tense, remember that you have to tell the children that the rest of the paragraph also needs to be in past tense. So you can't start off with "this is my school" and then go on to "my school was." So if you start with "is," the rest of the paragraph should also move into the through the present tense. If you're writing something in the past tense, then the whole paragraph needs to be in the past tense. So correcting them about the verbal forms, reminding them of these things, reminding them of the first person. Suppose you're writing a personal narrative with "I." You're talking, you're starting the paragraph with "I am" and so on. So the rest of the paragraph should also move with the "I." It shouldn't suddenly become as if a second or third person is giving information. So maintaining the first person or the passive voice, the active voice, the number of things. Again, if you're talking about "my school," it's only one school you are talking about. Then suddenly you shouldn't go to "schools have cafeterias." So it shouldn't go into the plural form later on. So once you start with a singular, it will remain a singular, especially with the key topic that you're dealing with. So correct them, and because these are some of the very common errors that you find with a lot of our children, they start with one tense and then move on to other tenses within the same paragraph. Same thing, they may start with "I" and then they may, later on their sentences would end up with "he," "she," or, the "I's" would have disappeared. So maintaining a consistency in the correct verbal form is important. Making them aware that this is how it needs to be done in a paragraph is important. Also, when you're using, nouns, don't always keep using the same noun. For example, if you're writing about "my school," don't every sentence need not begin with "my school," and so on. You can add pronouns, "it," and if you're using for people, you can have "she," and it doesn't have to be, again, it's not like the first sentence is "my school" and then it becomes "it" throughout. Ask them to go back and forth. So the first sentence can be "my school," and then it can be "it is a very nice school," or whatever they're writing. And then after one or two sentences, again, they can say "my school." So it captivates the reader. Show them how when you intermingle the cases, the reading becomes more interesting. So, using pronouns really makes your writing more interesting, or otherwise it ends up being very repetitive, pattern-like sentences and very monotonous. Again, when they're writing nouns and pronouns, there should be a correlation. So if they're talking about the boy, then it needs to be "he" or "him, as if you're referring to his things. It shouldn't become, the boy shouldn't end up becoming they, because you see here the gender, the number, everything changes. So the consistency in keeping with the gender, with the nouns, the pronouns, all that is very important. Quite often we find if the story or the paragraph is about the boy, as they write along, it suddenly becomes "she," "they," and so on when they're referring to the boy itself. So these kind of errors shouldn't creep up. And when, it is important to remind children and to show them that once they start with something, and if they're describing that same thing, that consistency, whether it is with regard to number or the to be verbs that you use, like "is." If you're talking about one consistently, it should be "is," or, it shouldn't suddenly change to "are," and so on. So using these, maintaining consistencies throughout in your grammatical forms is very important. Using clear and correct word order. So read the sentences, reread it to see whether it makes sense. using conjunctions to link and expand sentences. When we talked about expanding sentences in our previous workshop, we talked about how you can use and, but, because, therefore, these kind of linking words, which are known as conjunctions, which can be used to expand or add more details to your sentences. So encourage the use of these kind of conjunctions. Use a variety of sentence structures. So not just use very basic, small, simple sentences, but try and use different kinds of sentences. And if necessary, they can even use question form of sentences in between a paragraph. So after writing about my school, a few things about my school, they can even put in a question sentence, to make it more lively. Then ask, what do you think about my school now? An asking sentence, an interrogative sentence has been put into the paragraph, but it adds on to the reader's interest. So, you can show ways on how they can use a variety of sentence structures that will add on to the beauty and to keep up the reader's interest when they write a paragraph. And then talking about the different kinds of words, the grammatical parts of a sentence that add on to the word order or add on to the meaning of the sentence, that it makes sense. We have talked about some part of the grammar in the earlier workshop. This, I reiterate, you can, as part of your grammar lessons, go over the different parts of the speech. This is a very, very good anchor chart that I find very useful in classes. All the 9 parts of speech, which are predominantly in all our grammar lessons, like nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, conjunctions, articles, prepositions, interjections, all these are put there. And if you see, they're color coded. Each one, in each one, noun, for example, is purple. And it in the box which says noun, it says what a noun is. So, you can constantly remind the children what these are when they're writing their sentences. And at the bottom, you'll see in big font, you find a big sentence written with different color codes. If you look at each of those colors and you can look at the parts of speech, it will match that. So if you look at the blue word, the boy yelled, the is an article. So that is why it is color coded as blue. The word boy is purple, and that is a noun. The other one, next word yelled, is more of a lilac indigo color. That's the verb. So again, if you give a color code like this, and if you constantly keep drawing children's attention to reiterating a lot of the grammatical concepts, that also helps, because that has a close link with the written work, how they construct sentences, what are the different ways they can use to construct sentences. If you look at this sample sentence also, you find different kinds of punctuations also here. There is a comma, there are speech marks, there's a full stop at the end of the sentence. So all these kind of help the children to understand. And if you have an anchor chart like this in your classroom, and if you're constantly referring to it, just like you use word balls to refer to words, you can use these anchor charts which to refer and constantly revise and improve their grammatical skills if you use things like this. The next part is the vocabulary building, using of good words, different kinds of words to express when they use, to amplify the beauty of their writing. One thing is, like many of you said, word banks can be provided, key vocabulary which relates to the topic that they're going to write can already be provided so that they can use those words while they're writing the paragraph. You can also encourage use of synonyms, like the same word but having and other words which mean the same thing. That can be encouraged so that again their writing doesn't appear to be very monotonous and repetitive. Alternative words, and this can be done through the use of thesaurus, both online thesaurus or print thesaurus. You can also have anchor charts for these. For example, see how we can use a thesaurus. A good anchor chart is provided here. Different words which say the same thing. So in the picture where you see the boy running, it says I run, Jane runs, Ralph So Jane runs can be written as Jane sprints. So another word for run. So it doesn't always have to be run. Another word sprint can be used. Ralph runs. Ralph jogs. So another word in place of runs. We run. We race. So see, so many different words, sprints, jogs, race, have all been given in place of the word run. So making children aware that in a thesaurus, you can get suitable words which mean the same thing, which can be added on to your writing to make your writing more interesting and more word rich, which ultimately improves the quality of the writing can be done. Said is dead is another very popular anchor chart. And it's not, there are several said is deads that can be seen. Sometimes I've also got children to, write said is dead and ask them to read a story, for example, or read a particular text, and then find what are all the different words that means the same as said. So all the other words in the text that you can find that means the same as dead, and ask them to list it out. So in this anchor chart, you can see how so many different words have been given in the place of the word said: demanded, asked, wondered, muttered, yelled, told, exclaimed, screamed. So many different words that can be used in place of the word said. So this is how you encourage vocabulary building. You can give clue words. You can ask them to look up a thesaurus and use, a variety of words instead of repeating the same words over and over again in their writing pieces. This is another very popular anchor chart. Again, several common words, for example, the word nice. What are the different ways of saying nice? Good, bad, sad, happy, laughed. All these words, the key words, and what are other similar words that mean the same thing. So you can substitute those words, when you write the sentence. So you don't have to always use the same boring basic word all the time. Instead, you can use a wide variety of words to make your written pieces more and more vocabulary rich. So using anchor charts like these, providing a lot of times I give these activities also to students. As I said, I get them to read a particular story or a particular lesson and give them any one particular word. And I ask them find several words from the story that mean this thing or are similar to this particular word I've given. Again, it's a discovery process of, finding out different words that mean the same thing and using them actively also when they do their writing. So coming down to, we've kind of had a good idea about what is writing, what is it that we need to teach them, how we have to go through the power process, how we have to, within the power process, the editing part, how we have to go through the COPS part of it. So you have a fair idea about what it entails to teach paragraph writing. So think about the special needs children. Where exactly what is it that they have challenges in, especially with regard to expressive writing skills. I would like the participants to come forth with what they think are the challenges they face with children with special needs, and also keeping in mind whatever I've talked about till now on how to produce a written piece. Any suggestions?
They say grammar, spelling, sentence construction could be a challenge, difficulty framing sentences on their own, difficulty in using words, organizing the thoughts, sentence construction, organization of ideas, difficulty writing clearly, spellings, unable to form complete sentences, dyslexia, creativity, difficulties with synonyms, punctuation, difficulty breaking paragraphs, lack of vocabulary, skipping of words, difficulty in writing words, writing a paragraph is felt as a burden, difficulty using words, organization of ideas, spelling errors, difficulty sequencing, joining sentence with correct grammar, difficulty in forming new ideas, spelling mistakes, similar looking words they get confused, difficulty in comprehension, reasoning abilities are low, use of vocabulary, not willing to write, unable to identify the words, difficulty expressing ideas, difficulty in using different meaning of words, coherence is missing, difficulty in constructing sentences, word building is a challenge. They have bits and pieces of information, difficulty in writing a particular pattern, comprehension, synonym.
Yeah, I think pretty much they've covered everything. They've been very active listeners. So very nicely put to all those participants who've been contributing this. Yes, I'll just do a quick, a wrap up of what you've been saying. Yes, it's first thing is think of the power process, the planning stage. When it's a pre-writing stage, they have to think about ideas about the topic that they've been given. So what is the challenge our children could have in that area? They could have poor knowledge or weak information about the topic that you've given them to write. So one way, so that is one thing that could happen. As you said, the sentences formation, the length of the sentences may be limited. They may not know how to construct a good sentence. But again, remember, until and unless they know how to construct at least a basic sentence, you cannot move into paragraph writing. So that has to be in place when you move into paragraph writing. But the length of the sentence, the variety of sentences they use may be very limited at this stage. Weak vocabulary, yes, not having enough word power in them to be using different kinds of words or synonyms. Sentence cohesion, that is the flow from again, it's a part of an organization skill difficulty, flow from one sentence to the other, linking them or connecting them, and being unaware of the whole writing process. So when you are telling them just write a paragraph, they don't know that you have to do these things. They don't know that, okay, first you have to gather all the information. Then you have to put those information in a certain order. Then you have to frame sentences to go about doing it. Then you have to, once you make a rough draft, you have to, proofread it and look for errors and correct recheck and reread and correct your errors, and then do a final piece. So being unaware of the complete writing process itself. Then, of course, our children, we know they do have cognitive processing difficulties. That is attention. Producing a written piece like a paragraph requires a lot of attention. Working memory, keeping information in mind while they're writing the paragraph. Being able to reason out and, giving a certain logical reasoning and thought process to organizing your ideas. All these are the challenges faced by children with special needs. So what do we do to do this? Since we know what the issues are, like I've already said, use topics for writing which are from the known sources. That is from a story that they have read, or from a science or math topic that they've already learned, or an activity that they have done, or some real life experience that they've had. So these kind of things actually help. For example, if they've been on a picnic or been on a school trip, ask them to write about it because they've already experienced it firsthand. So using known topics, for their writing piece really helps. That solves a good part of the organizing, the planning part of the power process. Encourage sentence variety. So, if they've written a particular kind of sentence, give them a prompt with another kind of sentence. What is another way of saying it? Again, on all these processes, you have to constantly keep a dialogue with the child and ask them to add on to the length of the sentence, stretch the sentences out by adding more details. Provide word banks, provide thesaurus or synonyms. You have a lot of text support also nowadays with grammar check, spell check, etc. being available online. So they can make use of that. Teach the writing process. That is a crux of the thing. Each step has to be taught. And when they're learning to write a paragraph, you don't insist on, the end product of the paragraph at the beginning. You have to spend considerable time. One paragraph may be produced maybe at the end of 3 or 4 different lessons. So your take each period in your instruction to probably teach one step in the writing process. So, taking that time. So maybe in a term, you may not write more than 3 or 4 paragraphs, but that's okay because you've taken them through the writing process. Once you take them through the process, then they know, what is the process they have to follow, even when they're given a topic on their own. Provide all the necessary tools that is required, like the graphic organizers, like thesaurus, the clue word bank, etc. Accommodations and modifications, etc. If they need, if they have cognitive processing difficulties, if they have attention issues, give them a minimal distraction area. If they need to cancel out noise, some children can wear earbuds or headphones to cancel out noise so that they are not distracted. If they have working memory issues, at least all the information can be put in a graphic organizer form, or you can give picture clues, to clue them on. They can even have, if it is a lengthy written piece, you can ask them to write it bit by bit so that they can have a little break in between and then get back to the writing so that they don't have to sit at one stretch and write a lengthy piece of writing. So think of all the accommodations and modifications depending on what each child requires and what their challenges and needs are. So providing all these things sums up the strategies and techniques that need to be used for children with special needs. So some of the sample activities can be sequencing. We already talked about, sequencing really helps them to organize. So it could be sequencing a story. Again, as I said, there's a lot of overlap between comprehension and written expression. You can give paragraph puzzles where you've already made up a paragraph and you've chopped it up into bits and pieces. They have to find the topic sentence, the concluding sentence, and then arrange the supporting detailed sentences as if they're putting a puzzle together. So, to develop sentence cohesion. So again, in the expressive writing, not a lot of hands-on activities can be done because it is a very, very paper pencil oriented thing. And with children with special needs, this is one way of providing those multisensory hands-on way of, converting the written process into understanding what goes into building a paragraph. So you can give descriptive paragraph writing where they actually do an art activity where they've sequenced a story. And then based on that, they write a paragraph by looking at the pictures. So giving picture clue prompts, field trip reflections. I just talked about how real life experiences can be converted into a written activity where they can go on a field trip, then use the pictures as a prompt and then write, given a proper template, an empty template or a graphic organizer, they can write about the field trip. So, all these things add on to introducing and retaining good written expression in children. Additional activities can be, as I said, present a picture, ask a story, child to create a story around it, or you can begin a story and then ask children to develop the story further. So you can give the beginning part and then they have to develop the story and end it. Or you can give the beginning and middle part of the end, but ask the children to change the concluding part of the story. So again, different ways of, adding on to the written expression. You can give list of words, sentences, ask them to weave a story around it. You can give story cards, sequencing cards, ask them to, sequence it in order and then do a written activity based on that. So all these things, finally, what it appears is, from listening, speaking, once you come into reading and comprehension, right from there, you can branch out into the area of written expression. And the more you try and link reading comprehension activities, and not just in the language area, but also in your speech, social studies, math areas, and link it up with your written expression, it helps overcome a lot of these written expression difficulties in children with special needs. And the key thing is teach the power process, teach the POPs process. It is painstaking to teach it. It is a very slow process, but once you do it, it will be there in the children forever. So the key takeaways for in this workshop is systematically teaching the writing process is important for developing good written expression. Application of vocabulary, grammar, punctuation, all these exercises ultimately have to be applied in the creative writing process. Teaching revision, rechecking, proofreading skills is very, very important for children with special needs. And then also keep in mind the cognitive processing difficulties they have. And depending on whatever cognitive processing difficulties and challenges they have, you might have to modify your writing activities or to modify the classroom setup, the way you present the activities in such a way that you can accommodate those kinds of deficits and challenges in children. So that brings us to an end of today's workshop. Thank you. That was a very lengthy, intense session, I'm sure. I hope the participants will go back and do a lot of thinking over it, because with writing, thinking is a big part of the writing process. So this is just to give you a feel of how important and how big an area the written expression area is. Open to question and answers now.
Thank you so much, Geetha ma'am, for a wonderful session. The chat box is overflowing with gratitude for sharing all these lovely ideas with our participants. Dear participants, the feedback link is now being shared in the chat box. Do give your valuable feedback, where 5 stars means that you loved our session, Geetha ma'am, and 1 that means there's hope for improvement. Also, all the takeaways for today's event will now be posted in the chat box. The slide deck document, the resources for the particular workshop with the worksheets are available for you to view and download. Do check out the links in the chat box. Also, I would like to inform you all that you could help Ability in the mission of spreading awareness. If you enjoyed today's session, do share the certificate program with the others, friends and colleagues. Do share the resources that are a part of today's session and the other resources that you find it to be valuable, so that we can help children with special needs improve and achieve better outcomes. You could also become Ability's inclusion champion and bring about positive change in the world. Also, taking you through our upcoming events. The links for the upcoming events are posted in the chat box now. You could book your slots. On the 7th of April, we have Managing Challenging Behaviors of Children with ADHD in a Classroom Setting by Dr. Sudipta. And on 12th of April, we have Developing Math Readiness Skills in Children with Special Needs by Mrs. Smitha Tripathi. All of it will be done at 12:30 p.m. Nigeria time, 4:30 p.m. India time, and 7 p.m. Singapore and Philippines time. Do forward the links to others who can benefit from it. Now, it's open for questions. Geetha ma'am, are you ready for the first question from our participants?
Yes. Yes.
So we have a question from Ismail Sumoro, who wanted to ask you, when we have been speaking about creative writing, what could be the strategies to improve creative writing skills at the primary level?
Early primary, like it was mentioned in last week's workshop, I'm not sure if you attended it, how to form a sentence. That's a basic thing, how to go about sentence building. Once they've learned sentence building, then you get into, stringing together 3 sentences or 5 sentences, etc., to form a small paragraph, which we dealt with in today's session. So building a paragraph is the basic building block of, expressive writing. Once you get past the initial 1 sentence stage. And as I said in today's thing, go teach the writing process. Don't think, nowadays usually what we find in the regular classroom is, teachers do a lot of brainstorming is done, a lot of group discussion is done, ideas are elicited, and then it's like, okay, now write. That in between process, and when that is missing. And it's not just for children with special needs, even regular children who are not very good, may not be very fluent writers or, natural writers. Not everybody is a natural writer. Even for them, if you don't teach the writing process, it becomes very difficult for them to learn how to draft a good paragraph. So it is very, very important to teach the writing process. And to be very, like when I've taught primary, where usually paragraph writing comes towards in grade 2 level. Towards the end of grade 1, we kind of introduced 3-sentence paragraphs. But by grade 2 is when we actually enter into, paragraph writing. And what I do is, as I said, in a term, you may not even get 3 or 4, you might just about manage to get 3 or 4 paragraphs. That's how slow it is. Because if you're actually spending time on the writing process. So again, as I said, to solve these issues that are involved with the writing process, choose topics which they are familiar with when you're first starting with writing. And one of the things I've done is, rather than go for descriptive paragraphs, start with informatory or explanatory paragraphs initially. Because if it is informative, the facts are there, right? So for example, I usually use science topics, or social studies topics. If it's a science topic, if it's an animal topic or a plant topic, or how the butterfly, the life cycle of a butterfly, for example, something that they've actually read in the science book, seen a video of, or done an art activity where they've cut and pasted the pictures of a life cycle of a butterfly, then it's easy to write a paragraph on it, because there is factual information which they've already learned, and then they can concentrate more on framing the sentences in a certain logical sequence and making up a paragraph with what a paragraph needs to have: the topic sentence, the supporting details, and the concluding sentence. So, teaching that writing process is very important. And for in the planning stage, as I said, once you get to the organization stage, use different kinds of graphic organizers. And not all graphic organizers should be introduced at once. Use one. Usually I start with a hamburger paragraph organizer or a paragraph web organizer. And then, slowly, as children get more comfortable with that, then we can use other ones. Also, remember, in reading comprehension also, you would be using a lot of graphic organizers. So if you've used it in reading comprehension, then you can use that as a springboard into writing and link it up with what you've already taught. That really helps. If you've already taught a lesson, use that lesson as a base for your writing topic. That really would help. And in the primary, there's no other go. It is a hard process of going through the power process.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Following the sequential teaching that you had shared with the participants will be helpful in the primary level. We have a question from Neo and other participants. They wanted to ask you, as per your experience, at what age can children construct a complete sentence or a paragraph after they are able to spell words correctly?
See, sentence writing normally towards the end of upper KG, some of the very the very good ones do, at least orally. If they can construct a sentence, then you can start trying to put them into writing. Okay, so initially when we say sentence construction, it is oral construction. So if they're able to do it orally, then what matters is whether they're able to spell it out, or whether they're the mechanics of writing it. So again, it depends on how their reading is, whether they are phonetically able to map the word, sound out the word and then write it down, or whether they're familiar with the common sight words that needs to be put into the sentence, even if they're not phonetically decodable. So again, it is very, very closely linked with reading and comprehension, teaching of phonics, teaching of sight words. So start with oral construction of sentences and then start putting it into writing. And this can happen with regular children by towards the end of KG2. We normally start with this, but again, with children with special needs, it might be delayed depending on how challenged they are. By grade 1, definitely by the end of grade 1, they should be able to write, regular children should be able to write a pretty decent, simple sentence at least. Again, as I said here, different children with special needs are different. So it depends on how well they can produce sentences. Grade 2 is when we actually start with paragraph writing. Again, as I said, this is regular curriculum. So again, just because it is there in the regular curriculum, sometimes our children with special needs may not have reached that level. So basically, you have to find out where the child is, and then from there, you have to handhold them and take them through the process. So start with oral construction of sentences, then go into putting it into writing, and then move into the paragraph. Grade wise, the regular grade levels, grade 2 is when paragraph writing really starts. There are all three kinds of paragraph writing. Then, these formatted letters, simple small letters, invitation notes, thank you notes, birthday invitation, these kind of things are all taught in grade 2. And one paragraph definitely in grade 2. By the end of grade 2, sometimes we also get them to write maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs on a story map or summarizing a story, if they are able to do that at that stage. This is regular ed, again, as I said. So it depends on where the child is at, what the child's capabilities are, and from there you take them stepwise. It may not happen at that grade level. Sometimes you have even at grade 8, you're still teaching them how to construct a good paragraph. So it depends on what the child's strengths and challenges are.
Knowing the current functioning level of the child will really help to move ahead and progress while teaching creative writing skills. Now we have a question from Samson Hickman, who wanted to know from you how to engage children with learning difficulty in creative writing.
This is more to do with motivation. See, a lot of times they're not motivated, mainly because A, they may not know what the topic is about. Then, or if they are children who have attention difficulties, for example, the very thought of sitting at one place for a long time and having to write, that can be, a setback. Sometimes not knowing how to spell words, the very difficulty of not knowing spellings and such things pose problems. So to motivate them, this is why I said, when you're choosing a topic, choose topics which are in the known realm of knowledge, or something that is very exciting. For example, there was a child I had who wasn't very much into writing, but he was very, very interested in cricket, in the game of cricket. So I asked him to do some research on his favorite cricketer. That motivated him, and then get him to write about, collect pictures of that cricketer, and then write a paragraph about this particular player that he likes. So, motivation is a big factor. So choose areas of high interest, choose areas which are very familiar to them, because again, that reassures them that they can do it. A lot of times they don't like the process of writing, simply because they think it is too cumbersome. It is too much of hard work. So if you make it easier at some point, I'm not saying it dilute it completely, but start from a point which is familiar to them or of high interest to them. That will really bring about the motivation. And then initially don't insist on 10-line paragraphs. Sometimes it can be as short as 3. Then you can slightly tell them, okay, next, after a few sessions, make it 5 sentences, add on a few more, and then slowly extend the length of your paragraphs. That is, again, step by step, asking them to increase the length really helps.
Starting small is the key to go about. Now we have a case-specific question, ma'am, by Guillaume Luc Abscon, who states that I have some students who were not interested in basic writing principles, who were not instructed on basic writing principles like capitalization, indentation for each new paragraph, punctuation skills. What could be the solutions that work best for students like these who have had missed instruction?
See, I showed you some of the anchor charts during today's presentation. Have these anchor charts on the walls of your classroom. When you set them to give these paragraph writing, ask them, go over these anchor charts, tell them, okay, this is what your paragraph needs to have. It needs to have this. It needs to have a topic sentence, supporting details, or conclusion sentences. Whatever it is that you want them to be reminded of, put those things up there, because and constantly take them through that. At each stage, when you are going round, while the children are writing, when you're going round, when you find that they're making errors or that they're lost, draw their attention back to whatever anchor chart will apply to them where they're making errors. So reminding them that there are resources that they can look up to and recorrect themselves. That is very important. Also, one of the things that can be done is, before you, when you set the activity, once, once you're getting them into, after all the discussion and everything, when they are going into the process of writing, and sometimes I've also done up a little guideline rubric. Rubric is where, 1, 2, 3, 4, like you have these things. Did you put a topic sentence in? Did you add 3 sentences for supporting details? Did you add a concluding sentence? Did you check each and every spelling in your work using a word book or dictionary? Did you reread your paragraph and put in any, check for punctuation errors? So put this kind of rating rubric. Sometimes what I do is I used to type these up, and these they can cut, and I used to distribute these things which they had to paste on their exercise book. Or you can have this rubric even put up on the board. I used to type a big one, laminate it and put it up, so that, when after they've written the paragraph, they have to go through each of these guidelines and see whether they've done each of these things and put a check. Okay, I've done this. So having a rubric in the exercise book also helps. After they've written the first draft, ask them to go through each thing. Have I done this? Have I done this? And if they've done it, put a tick mark. So basically what you're doing is giving them a guideline, a rating scale to go through the writing process themselves. And that really helps. Providing a rubric to go along with, it's like giving written directions on, once you've said it, it's out of their mind, but you have put it in writing there and they have to do each step. So before they even come to you for submission, go through that rubric guideline, and that will help them to, that will remind them to go through all these things and then produce a final draft. And sometimes what happens is that some children, we find that spelling errors can be very difficult. Especially spelling errors, many of them do find it difficult to, if they have dyslexia particularly, they may be very poor spellers themselves. So there may be times when what I do is, instead of marking it, I usually use a pencil and, I just underline and ask them to go back to their places and recheck the spellings of those particular words, because they're not able to pick on the errors themselves. So you pick on the errors, but instead of marking it wrong, you ask them to go and recorrect those words and bring it back to you. And of course, provide them with the tools, dictionaries, word walls. They can look up the correct spellings from wherever, or whatever resources are available.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing a bunch of practical activities with them. We have a question now. It's by Edilina Bertha Shala, who wanted to ask that all these activities that we are being speaking of, can they be used in terms of a group class as well? Because children with special needs usually achieve creative writing skills in an individual focus. So can these activities or strategies be used in terms of a group class, or are there any other activities in a group class setting?
Well, I have used these in large group classrooms, also in regular ed classrooms also. These are all the things that I've been telling you are not just for special needs kids. This is part of universal design for learning. Universal design means it benefits all children, but it is absolutely necessary for children with special needs, because they don't pick it up on their own. But it is absolutely beneficial for all children. So if you're doing that process already in your regular classrooms, it will be reaching, at least some bit of it will be reaching the special needs child also. But yes, having said that, our children do have additional, even if you do it in so many different ways, they will still need that extra practice or extra help, for which small group sessions or a lot of times individual sessions are necessary. What I have usually done when I've worked in regular schools, I've worked considerable amount of time in regular schools with mixed ability classrooms. What I do is I teach the process to the whole class, and once they get kick-started, I could go around or pull apart the child who needs more help. and or maybe a couple or 2 or 3 children in your class who need that kind of help, ask them to come over, or I have a little table at the back and I ask them to come over there, and then I give them more individualized help. Or if you have a learning or teaching assistant, learning support assistant in your classroom, you can make use of their help also when you want to give more a small group or individualized support to your children. And yes, having said that, some of them would need clinical remediation to teach them exactly how to write. So that goes without saying. But all these techniques, as I said, these are all part of universal design for learning. So it is beneficial for all, but it is absolutely necessary for some.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Whatever strategies that ma'am is sharing can be used for all children, but with children with special needs, there would be more practice. Now we have a question from Maria Duran-Gare, who wanted to know what to do if the child with special needs refuses to cooperate while writing.
See, again, here, this is the motivational issue. It's so find things that interest the child. You can use behavior management, like, giving points, stars, or, those kind of things to motivate the child to work towards it. If the writing activity is a long activity, that can be very unmotivating. The child may not be interested. So again, breaking it down. As I said, a complete paragraph doesn't have to be produced all at once in one sitting. So break it up. Initially, maybe one day you can just do the discussion, brainstorming part of it. The next day you can take you can review the brainstorming and take it to the putting it into the visual graphic organizer, organizing your ideas part of it. Third day you can again take those ideas into the organization part of it and do a rough draft. So break it up into different sittings and sessions. That really helps. Also, some of the children, the very mechanical process of writing may be difficult. So you can, use alternative methods, such as, use a text to speech to text software where they can just speak their ideas and the software will convert it into text. Or they can use typing, word processing, instead of doing it manually, instead of doing manual writing. So these kind of things actually help. Basically, see what interests the child, what motivates the child, what are the barriers for that particular child, which is preventing the child from entering into the act of writing. So based on that, you provide the necessary support systems, the necessary accommodations, necessary things. Sometimes it might just be they think they can't spell the words out. A lot of children do that. They say, I don't know how to write. That is a constant refrain. So I ask them further, can you tell me your sentence? I can help you with the writing part of it. So when they say it orally, so I would say, okay, the first word, I. You can write I, can't you? Oh, yes, I can. So write it. That gives them the confidence. And then maybe the second word is difficult for them. So then you can give them a prompt. Maybe that word can be sounded out. Or if it's a sight word, say the word is have, and the child, so you can say, okay, use a dictionary, use a word book. A word book is something like a sight word dictionary that I used to use with my kids. So, or you look at the word walls where all the important sight words are put up. So find the word, write it. So once you build up the confidence like that, they know that even if they don't know something, there is some place they can look for support and access, access the spelling or correct their mistake. Or if you're giving them a rubric, they know there is something that is guiding them. Even if the teacher is not right there in front of them, there is a rubric that is guiding them to tell them what is it that they have to do next. So giving, hand holding them, giving them the support where it's needed, weaning off the support when it's not needed, and getting them towards greater independence. All these go a long way in getting them interested in the art of writing.
Thank you so much, Geetha ma'am, for patiently answering all the queries from our participants. And as you rightly said, all these skills go hand in hand. We need to work with the child from the known to the unknown and take it as a step-by-step process from the child's current level of functioning. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with the community, Geetha ma'am. And thank you, dear participants, for actively participating for the session. Geetha ma'am, your words for our participants.
I think it's been a wonderful session, and as usual, the Ability participant community is a great community, I must say. They have always been very gracious and very, knowledgeable in the kind of opinions and suggestions that they give through this interaction we have during the workshop. So it is very motivating for me also as a presenter to have to speak to such a an active and vibrant community. And definitely with Ability, I know you always create very top-notch quality support and quality content. So again, it's a pleasure to be always working with such a lovely community.
Thank you so much, Geetha ma'am. It's our pleasure too. Dear participants, the feedback link is again being shared in the chat box. Do drop in your valuable feedback and also taking you through the upcoming events. Check out the links now in the chat box for our upcoming events and do share it with anyone who can benefit from it. On the 7th of April, we have Managing Challenging Behaviors of Children with ADHD in a Classroom Setting by Dr. Sudipta. On 12th of April, we have Developing Math Readiness Skills in Children with Special Needs by Mrs. Smita Tripathi. Do share the care and forward the link to others who can benefit from it. Until we meet again, it's a big bye from Team Ability. Stay home and stay safe.